8 different trade targets after week 2 of fantasy football. Who should you be buying and who should you be selling ahead of week 3? Now is the best time to start solidifying your roster with more stud than you anticipated this year. We're going to talk 8 different names, whether you should be buying them or looking to flip them for other valuable assets. We'll start with our buys first time. We'll start at the running back position. The YouTubers can see it on the screen here. Who's your first buy at running back?
It's Kyren Williams, and I think this is probably the most opportunistic time to go get a guy like Kyren Williams, just because I think people are going to be willing to cut their ties with really any Rams player. I mean, yes, Cooper Kupp is going to be on IR. We know that Puka is going to be on IR for an extended period of time. People just, I think, are going to be jumping off the ship of this LA Rams offense won't be as good, which I believe has some merit to it. I mean, you're losing 2 stud wide receivers. Obviously, your offense isn't going to be as good as it could be, but when you look at this offense, who else outside of Kyren Williams is really going to give you like valuable fantasy production? Like, we've talked to Marcus Robinson on waivers. Tyler Johnson has kind of come around, at least in week 1. He didn't really do anything in week 2. Some people like Jordan Whittington. Tutu Atwell has had like they're the wide receivers, Kobe Parkinson, even like all these pass catchers, they feel more like stashes than guys that you're going to be able to rely on in the middle of the season. So the only Ram that you're going to be able to rely on is Kyren Williams. And I get it's not exciting, but this is one of those trade targets where if Kyren is just going to give you 14, 15, 16 a week, you're going to take it, right? Obviously, like, he's not going to have that elite upside, right? When the Rams offense is at full strength, and he can give you 20, 21, 22 on a week. But if he's going to give you 14, 15, 16 on a week, and you're kind of looking at, you're running back 2 and you're like, gosh, I'm constantly rotating in my running back 2 with some other guys, or you're looking at waivers, right? You're looking for like a Carson Steele to maybe save you a little bit with running back depth. I think this is the week to go get a guy like Kyren Williams, because the guy is going to continue getting touches in this Rams offense, and you know that he's going to get fed too, because McVay trusts him, and he is the most skilled playmaker on that offense now.
I think the thing that terrifies me with Kyren Williams is just how bad the Rams offensive line has looked this year. I mean, the dude has averaged 2.4 yards per carry this year through 2 games. I don't think that necessarily continues, but when he only averaged 2 yards per carry against an Arizona Cardinals run defense that I think actually has gotten better this year, maybe a little bit, but that's a game he should have taken advantage of, even behind a banged up offensive line. He's fallen to the end zone, which has been his saving grace. I don't hate him as a buy candidate. The problem is when he's scored 14 plus each of the first 2 weeks, I don't know if you're getting enough of a discount on Kyren. I think you would, like you said, have to find the manager who's willing to jump ship. But yet at the same time, you make a very plausible case that's similar to the buy that I'm going to be talking about at the running back position, where it's like you look at the Rams offense and who else is it? And Blake Corum ain't playing any snaps. I mean, people look at his snaps and see his carries last week. It's like, okay, yeah. Check the first 45 snaps of the game. Kyren played 41 of them. Like, Blake Corum was not seen on the field. So yeah, Kyren is the one piece of the Rams offense that if you're still going to hold on and buy stock while everyone else is willing to jump ship and get out on their shares, I mean, this is probably the best time to do it. Or 3 weeks from now, which might be the better time. But that's the flip side of the coin here that I have is like, I don't know if I'd buy him now. I might be looking to buy him in 3 to 4 weeks when Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp are looking at coming back too.
I think you could also maybe even give it a week too, right? The week 3 matchup is San Francisco. Like, if Arizona can shut down the Rams rushing attack, San Francisco will be able to do yeah. So I think you could even give it a week too. This is more so like, hey, pay attention to your Kyren Williams manager in your league, because if you hear any rumblings of them, like, gosh, I don't like having to play Kyren, I will keep doing so, but it's not the elite Kyren Williams. jump on it, because if he's going to keep giving you 14, 15, 16, that's better than going to be rotating, your depth running back
Yeah.
pieces, your Jerome Fords, your Ty Chandlers, whoever you're throwing in your lineup at that point.
Yeah, if you have an embarrassment of riches elsewhere, like at the wide receiver position, it wouldn't hurt to go out and explore what you could potentially get Kyren Williams for. Now, for I alluded to my running back buy of the week, but before we get to that, I got to stop and talk to the 93%. Really, first, actually, I'm going to talk to the 7% because the 7%, thank you. We appreciate your support. You're subscribed. You watch our videos constantly. And we're grateful for you. But there's 93% of you out there who are admittedly you're just a bunch of freeloaders. You're just consuming our content without subscribing. So don't be a freeloader. We're gonna change that quick. All right. If you don't mind hitting the subscribe button, turning on those notifications as well. We got 3 videos a week for you all. We're doing panic meter, we're doing buys and sells, and we're gonna do 24 different players, whether you should be starting or sitting them every single week. So much content coming for you all. So thanks for your support. Hit that subscribe button, turn on those notifications as well over on YouTube. If you're on our podcast feed as well, you can do the exact same thing. My buy of the week is Josh Jacobs. Basically, for a lot of the same reasons you laid out with Kyren Williams, Ty, where he's going to get fed. I mean, we just saw him go for 151 yards on 32 carries against the Colts last week because the dude doesn't have Jordan Love. They don't want to put the ball in Malik Willis's hands. The big killer for Josh Jacobs, though, is that he just hasn't found the end zone yet, right? He has a league-leading 7 carries inside of the red zone and hasn't hit pay dirt. That's going to change at some point. Was this a fear that all 3 of us had coming into the season, that the touchdowns weren't just going to fall his way? Yes, but when you're also leading the league in red zone attempts, you're going to hit pay dirt sooner rather than later. Look, the volume is going to continue to be there. If Marshawn Lloyd can't figure out how to stay healthy either, and as long as Malik Willis is at quarterback, this dude is probably still going to get 20 plus carries every single game. It's not going to be 30 plus because let's just be honest. I mean, you can run on the Indianapolis Colts all day long. They're willing to get beat up in the middle of the field, but I don't think back-to-back finishes outside of the top 20 running backs is representative of how his season will continue to be if he keeps getting fed at the rate he has been. So looking at Josh Jacobs, he's only scored 12 and 13 fantasy points across his first 2 games. I just think there's a window here where you could go out and flip stud running backs that have been disappointing to get Josh Jacobs in return, who I think just has a much higher ceiling rest of season.
Yeah, and too that when Jordan Love comes back, that this offense is going to put points on the board. Like we are not going to see another 30 rushing attempt week from Josh Jacobs. This is very much a condensed game plan for Malik Willis. So again, when Jordan Love comes back and this offense is going to be able to move the ball, Josh Jacobs may be only getting 15, 16 rushing attempts, but at the same time, like that is a decent number of rushing attempts. And if he's going to fall into the end zone on a couple of those games, that we're talking about a guy that may be giving you 16, 17, 18 points a week at that point. So I very much agree with the Josh Jacobs buy. I think there may be some managers that are like, well, look if he's going to get 30 carries, like I don't really want to sell him, which I get. So maybe again, you need to kind of give it a week. Like, let's say for whatever reason, like Green Bay can't run the ball against Tennessee. That's your opportunity to pounce, because I feel like this is very, we've now mentioned this, like how you were saying, like there's some similarities between Kyren and my buy. The similarity for me between Josh Jacobs and Kyren is that like both of these guys seem like one game away from the manager kind of going like, yeah, I'm not really so sure like what I'm getting with these guys now. So the opportunity to pounce is quickly approaching for these guys.
I need to rewind for a moment. Was I calling Malik Willis Malik Neighbors during my whole opening bit?
You might have.
I've been doing it ever since he's become the starter because Malik Willis is irrelevant. Okay. Like I only have eyes for Malik Neighbors. It's the only Malik I have eyes for. He's the much more fun one to talk about. Okay. So just cut me some slack. It's 10 p.m. on Tuesday evening Central Time. Okay. We're recording this.
This guy stinks.
We're recording this so much later than we normally do. But no, coming back to Josh Jacobs, The other thing with him is that I think we're going to see him get more involved in this passing attack too. If Malik Willis is going to have the ball in his hands, they're not going to push it downfield. I don't think we're going to have another 0 reception game for Josh Jacobs here. I will say a fumble was pretty killer for his fantasy day too. That did knock him down 2 points here. So instead of the 15 fantasy points, you're stuck with 13. But I think this Green Bay Packers offense is going to end up being too good once Jordan Love gets back. And if their game plan is to just run the crap out of the football and take the ball out of Malik Willis's hands while Jordan Love is out, like sign me up if Marshawn Lloyd isn't going to be on the field to limit him in touches that way. Let's move on to wide receivers, Ty. We'll still stick with the buys. Who's your wide receiver buy?
It is Chris Olave. And I think you can look at this from the very simple point of view of just like, hey, this Saints offense is I don't want to commit to saying that they're the real deal after only 2 weeks, but it is pretty noteworthy that if you're going to put up 40 points in back-to-back games, like you are a tank that defenses have to figure out a way to stop. But for Olave, he did get tackled at the 1 yard line in week 2. So instead of a 12.8 fantasy point week, we could have been talking about an 18.8 week as him being the wide receiver 16. So I think we are getting close to Olave kind of, shaking off of the week 1, dud that he gave you. And I also think too, this Saints offense, I'm going to predict that they're going to regress a little bit. Again, putting up 40 points a game is a seriously high clip that if you're able to maintain that, you are winning the Super Bowl. I mean, like that's kind of like what we're talking about here, right? The Saints are running the ball with crazy efficiency right now too. Alvin Kamara is running at a 5.7 yards per carry clip. So I'm expecting some regression there too, because his average over the last 3 years is 3.8. Yes, different systems, but still a 2 yard difference in per carry. Like that is also something that I think we're going to kind of regress towards the mean here. The closer games are too, we're going to see more Olave in it too. So I think, this is kind of one of these kind of like under the radar targets that people may not be, fully aware that like Chris Olave is kind of like a sleeping giant, that he is about to get going. The guy is 16th in yards per route run, which is a metric that is commonly used to kind of, it's a predictive metric, you could say. I think Olave, again, with how this offense is producing right now, even if they're going to be putting up closer to 28, 29 points, I think Olave is going to have a bigger piece in that moving forward. I think he's one of the very few big name wide receiver buy targets right now. And I think he can come through eventually.
We need to create a new NFL award. We need to get in contact with Roger Goodell. We have the comeback player of the year, which as of right now is J.K. Dobbins. We need a comeback coach of the year. And can we give it to Clint Kubiak? Because my gosh, he is putting on a clinic right now with the New Orleans Saints. I mean, it is night and day different compared to what they were running previously, where it is dead last in pre-snap motion, bottom 5 in the league in play action rate. I mean, that has absolutely spiked, and you're seeing now Rashid Shaheed getting open across the middle of the field. And you're going to start to see, like you said, Chris Olave starting to feed into more of that as well. And the Saints, like primarily what they're doing is they're able to keep drives alive right now. Rich Rebar, Lord Reeves over on Twitter, phenomenal follow. Saints are winning on early downs, as is a massive part of their early season success here. Only 37.5 of their set downs have reached third down. That's 4th in the league this year. Last year, their rate was 55.2. That was 27th in the league. So the Saints are sustaining drives early and often, and that's the sign of a really good clicking offense right now. So yeah, like 12.8 fantasy points, I don't think is going to be representative of Chris Olave moving forward. Again, you talk about him falling into the end zone, adding another yard and a score, you're looking at him with 19 fantasy points on the week instead of only 13. And that is an investment I am willing to make with how good the New Orleans Saints look right now. No questions asked. My wide receiver buy, look, there's no bigger screaming buy right now than Jamar Chase of the Cincinnati Bengals. He is the squeakiest of all squeaky wheels in the history of squeaky wheels going into this. Can you tell he's a squeaky wheel? I mean, this dude didn't get his contract in the offseason. The team is off to an 0-2 start. They've taken a terrible loss to the New England Patriots and basically gave the Kansas City Chiefs a win in week 2. And he was visibly upset. I mean, he was getting after the refs after what I believed appeared to be a correct call. But now going into week 3, my gosh, it's chef's kiss perfection. He gets to unleash on the league's worst secondary in the Washington Commanders. I just don't even want to give more analysis on that, because I shouldn't have to tell you why an underperforming first round pick going up against the league's worst secondary is worth pushing the chips on. Simple as that. Go out and buy Jamar Chase. Like, you'll probably have to pay 95 cents on the dollar, but that 95 cents on the dollar is going to return that full dollar. You are automatically winning that investment against the Washington Commanders.
Yeah. I wonder if people are also going to be like, well, T. Higgins is coming back.
It's only helpful.
That's it. Like, it only helps Jamar Chase, actually, because not only, I mean, that just opens things up for Jamar Chase. There is never a bad reason to not go try and buy fantasy studs, right? First round picks. If you can come up with a negative case or a like an anti case for going and trying to trade for Jamar Chase, I want to hear it in the comments, because
right.
I struggle to come up with it myself, because I don't think there is one. So you can let me know if it's anything along the lines of Joe Burrow's wrist, if it's because you don't like Zach Taylor. Like, guys, like, there really is no reason to not at least attempt to go buy Jamar Chase right now.
And as someone who has been outspoken about Joe Burrow's wrist injury, this is somebody telling you right now to go out and invest in Jamar Chase, because his schedule coming up is too good. You can flip Jamar Chase later. Like, in some ways, fantasy football buying and selling in redraft leagues is a lot like the stock market, right? We want to buy guys when they're low on value, and then we want to capitalize when they're high on value, right? Like, in some ways, we're playing the stock market, but this is one where it's an absolute no-brainer. I mean, if you're the Jamar Chase manager, I find it hard to believe you don't see the Washington Commanders matchup coming up and you're just drooling over it. But again, I think at this point you could talk the Jamar Chase manager into 95 cents on the dollar and win that trade outright, 100%. Also, if you're over on YouTube, the math ain't mathin' for Jamar Chase's stat line here. I got the yardage right, but I clearly didn't update the rest of the stat line. It should be 5 targets, 4 receptions for 35 yards, 7.5 fantasy points, not 5, 6, 35. Anyways, Ty, let's take a quick break on that, and we'll be back with our sells after the break. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100. Alrighty, we are back. We have discussed our running back buys and our pass catcher buys. My gosh, spit it out, Lucas, for week 3 of fantasy football. Let's go into the sells now, Ty, and let's start at the running back position. Which running back are you looking to sell?
Yeah, not so much of a flashy name here, but it's Jerome Ford. You need to get what you can right now because this backfield is changing. it was a 3-man committee in week 2 between Jerome Ford, Deonta Foreman, and Pierre Strong. And Pierre Strong left with a hamstring injury. I don't know what his injury status is. So if you want to like get that for me, that would be pretty
Strong,
pretty
correct?
sweet of you. Pierre Strong, correct.
Keep talking.
But again, things are changing in this Cleveland backfield, right? In week 1, Jerome Ford had a 75% snap share. He fell into the end zone in garbage time. So his week was actually kind of like a decent week, even though like it wasn't the greatest offensive performance for Cleveland. But in week 2, right, with this 3-man, committee backfield, Jerome Ford's snap share dropped to 44%. Not good, right? Especially, especially after coming off of week 1 where you thought that he was going to be a workhorse bell cow type back for Cleveland. Again, Deonta Foreman had a 38% snap share and he got all the goal line carries. Okay. So Jerome Ford is no longer the workhorse that is going to get all the goal line, all the pass catching downs. He may get the pass catching downs, but he's not getting these goal line carries, right? So because things are changing, I'm not going to sit here and say that like Jerome Ford isn't going to be the 1A moving forward. I still think he will lead in snap share in this backfield. But again, the days of seeing 60, 65, 70, 75 plus in snaps, I don't think is going to continue happening. So if your league mates aren't paying attention, this is like the time you have to do it this week to sell Jerome Ford to those guys and try to, get something decent in return before it really kind of goes to crap.
Sell them on the New York Giants matchup too. Tell them this is
Yes.
a matchup that Jerome Ford could take advantage of. Could he? Absolutely. I mean, you could trade Jerome Ford this week and he could put up 15 fantasy points, but the piece you get in return will probably be better rest of season. And honestly, might have just as good of a chance at putting up 15 fantasy points that week. So I'm with you. I just want nothing to do with the Cleveland Browns offense. I'm going to be perfectly honest. Deshaun Watson looked better. I was a little bit harsh on him in yesterday's episode. I probably should have put more blame on the drops Amari Cooper had. But man, I mean, I don't know if I can trust Deshaun Watson to have a semi-competent game every week from here on out. And even when he did have a semi-competent game, like that doesn't impact the running back snaps, right? So if that is the new norm going forward, then whenever Nicholas Jamal Chubb decides to be a superhuman and come back, that just adds more murkiness as well. So this feels like the right time to get out on Jerome Ford because you can sell the New York Giants matchup. After next week, people could say, "Oh yeah, he's been good," but like, I don't know. Do I really want a guy when we're 3 weeks in and Nick Chubb could be back in 3 weeks? Do I really want that? This is the time to go ahead and capitalize on Jerome Ford while you can. I'm in agreement there. You went a less flashy name. I am going a flashy name. We got to talk Derrick Henry. To me, he is the biggest running back sell right now. Why, you ask? It's nice and cool that the guy is scoring touchdowns, like we all said he was going to. You and I never refuted that. He was going to score touchdowns this year. But that has led to him being the running back 31 in week 1 and the running back 14 in week 2. All right, that ain't nothing to write home about. We said this in our League Losers podcast when we talked about Derrick Henry having league losing downside. He's going to need more than straight up touchdowns to finish top 7, top 8, his running back price tag that he was going off the board at. And this Ravens offensive line, they're off to a concerning start to the season. And if Justice Hill is going to continue soaking up all the pass catching work, all the pass catching downs, you better be on your hands and knees praying right now that the Derrick Henry finishes with a Raheem Mostert kind of productive season where it's 20 plus touchdowns and he averages over 5.5 a carry. I just don't think that's going to happen behind this Baltimore Ravens offensive line. I think Justice Hill has a real chance to outsnap him more times than not this year. And I'm not using that as like a major point against Derrick Henry, but when you're not on the field catching passes in PPR formats, it just limits your upside. So what you need from Derrick Henry is quite literally 20 plus touchdowns and at least 4.5 a carry. I don't know if he's going to hit either of those behind this offensive line. That's my biggest concern. You can tell him now before it goes up against Dallas and Mike Zimmer says, okay, Lamar Jackson, you can go ahead and try and beat us with your arm this week.
Yeah, we've said this before. Derrick Henry is the 2023 Derrick Henry on Tennessee is exactly the Derrick Henry in 2024. The guy is going to benefit from a positive game script. And yes, Baltimore is, going to be favored in the majority of the games moving forward this year. The fact is, though, we're banking on touchdowns. And this Baltimore offense, to your point, it is not working. It is not producing at the same clip as it was last year. Can they? Sure. Something tells me, though, that we're not going to get back to where they were last year. It feels there's something off. Maybe it's the offensive line. I don't know what it is. This is just one of those kind of cases, I guess, where yes, like the name Derrick Henry as a sell doesn't click, but you have to think about it. And when you look at how Baltimore has been producing and working and operating, it makes sense, right? So the name value, the name again doesn't click. But there are other running backs that I feel much more confident taking a shot on for the rest of the year that could actually give me some, week winning upside and ultimately league winning upside.
Would you trade Derrick Henry straight up for Josh Jacobs right now?
Yeah.
I would too. That's the one where like I would go talk to the Josh Jacobs manager and say 1 for 1, let's flip.
Yeah.
You might be able to get that done. You might be able to get Josh Jacobs plus a positional swap where you win the positional swap for Derrick Henry right now.
If it's the right manager, you might be able to.
You might be able to. In the right league, you might be able to get a manager who's willing to just look at the fantasy points and say, Derrick Henry, he has a better chance at scoring touchdowns. Josh Jacobs doesn't have Jordan Love right now. I'll take that. And you might be able to get a wide receiver swap in there where you actually come out on the upper hand of that too. I'd be really tempted to go do that right now. If I'm Derrick Henry manager, I'm going to go find the Josh Jacobs manager, see if they're willing to do a little swapsies there and even, throw in a wide receiver where you get a slight upgrade at wide receiver too. I'm not talking like what's a good example? Like if you could do like a Jalen Waddle to Chris Olave, if you were to do Derrick Henry and Jalen Waddle for Josh Jacobs and Chris Olave, I would do that in a heartbeat. That might be a stretch with Skylar Thompson and now, but just spitballing a few names here to get some trade ideas rolling for the people.
I got this. Derrick Henry, Jalen Waddle, and Jerome Ford, right?
There it is.
If you can sprinkle in a Jerome Ford to convince the manager that they'll take on Waddle. Oh yeah. Even in a 3-for-2, right? And you're just getting back Jacobs and Olave, I'd still do it.
Oh, you would still do that. See, I think you could probably get a slight bit more than Olave for that.
Sure.
Just with how slow the start Olave's been going. But
yeah.
But I agree. You could package those three even and go get Jacobs plus, who's another guy you could look at in that range? Maybe not an Olave. You ain't getting Maserati Marv after his week 2. Think people are panicked enough on Garrett Wilson? I think Garrett Wilson's a little too spendy.
Maybe a little bit just because of capital spent, but
correct.
I don't even know if I can say he feels like another Olave, but he feels like another Kyren. If from the standpoint from the standpoint of just like what you're getting, it may not be pretty, but you know what you're getting, right? And you're getting again, maybe not the most upside week to week, but again, if he's going to be consistent for you, right? And it's not bottoming out every single week, there's some value to that, right? Just because at the end of the day, you are just trying to find the most points on your squad going up against your league mates.
Before we get to the pass catchers, the sells at the tight end and wide receiver positions here, Ty. If you're questioning whether you're getting fleeced in a trade or not, the number one place to check is over in our Discord, because we got a community over there that is like blowing up our Discord feed constantly. Like, I'm amazed. I click in and I'm like, well, you all are still talking, which is beautiful. It's a beautiful thing.
Love it.
But you can drop your trades over there and you'll get feedback from a multitude of people on how you can make your trade better, whether people think you're winning the trade or not. That link is down in the description of the video or podcast you are listening to. So go ahead and join our Discord. We got all sorts of wonderful channels over there for you all to connect with other members of our community. Don't get fleeced. At least ask first if you're really questioning it. Let's close out the episode, Ty. We got our pass catchers here. Who is your sell?
It's Mike Evans. And this one kind of stings a little bit, right? The guy that has gone for 1,000 yards each season of his career through 10 seasons. I'm not exactly confident enough to say that like we're hitting an age cliff kind of year with Mike Evans, because the guy can still produce. I mean, we saw it in week
23 and yeah, he put up 23 in week 1.
Right. The thing is, though, the usage is just not there so far for Mike Evans. In both games, he's only put up 6 targets. So you're not getting an elite, target getter, which that's never really been Mike Evans. But at the same time, like, you do expect a little more than 6, right? And the touchdowns is what, ultimately made his week 1 so good. He's the wide receiver 27 in expected fantasy points. And according to Hayden Winks' fantasy points versus expected model, which I highly recommend checking out because it tells you who's overproducing, who's underperforming, all those things. Evans is the wide receiver 30 in his model. So you're taking this kind of, you take that with Mike Evans, plus the rebirth of slot Chris Godwin, which
we'd love to see it.
Slot
one of the
Chris
best calls
Godwin.
of the offseason from our end here.
I keep laughing every time I see Chris Godwin, outproducing Mike Evans, because I literally said as my hottest take going into the year that Chris Godwin could outscore Mike Evans, and I'm like, you know what? Like,
on this end.
Man, I didn't even really think, like, I will say, like, there was at least a path. We tried to make like the hottest takes, like, very outside shot. And I was like, the more that I thought about it, I was like, man, I kind of believe that more than I should. But anyway, again, with Chris Godwin returning to the slot and producing it like he has so far this year, it's just going to make the inconsistencies, it's going to make the lack of usage just more frustrating and something to watch. I would understand if you're going to hold Mike Evans, but here's something that we have to watch moving forward. Mike Evans' average depth of target has decreased. Again, this is just 2 weeks, so I'm not going to go off on a limb and say like, this is definitely something that is going to happen for the rest of the year. But through 2 weeks, his ADOT is 11.3. His career average is 15. That's a 4-yard drop. Okay. It signals to me different usage, different utilization. If Mike Evans is not going to be the downfield guy that he has been for the majority of his career, what is the upside? I shouldn't say what is the upside for Mike Evans, but it's not the same Mike Evans as years past at that point. So I think at this point, Mike Evans, again, with all the other pieces or all the other things happening in this Tampa offense around Mike Evans, plus all these other question marks that I'm seeing, it pushes me enough to be like, you know what, I might try to flip Mike Evans for somebody else that I feel a little more confident in going week to week with.
Mike Evans is the perfect guy you go package for Jamar Chase right now.
Yes.
You go throw him in a package with somebody for Jamar Chase. The problem is you try and trade him for an Olave. That's like a 1-for-1. I would do a 1-for-1 there, and I don't know if at that point I'm like uber interested in moving off of Mike Evans just to get Chris Olave. But if I'm going Jamar Chase hunting, I'm selling week 1. I'm saying dude put up 23 in week 1. He's clearly still got it. Detroit Lions last week, they didn't need him. Chris Godwin was feasting over the middle. They were playing ahead in that game. They just didn't need Mike Evans, right? You go sell that to the Jamar Chase manager and you throw in, again, a Derrick Henry and you pick up somebody else in return. Again, we're spitballing names here just to get you going, right? You could go out and go big game hunting for a Jamar Chase with Mike Evans if you really wanted to. You could cook up the right package to land Jamar Chase and, a little bit of a consolation coming back your way for whatever else you package with Mike Evans. So yeah, I'm good selling Mike Evans. I'm much more of a believer in Chris Godwin right now than I am Mike Evans. And that's only because I've seen it through 2 weeks. Mike Evans could turn it around the next 3 weeks and my opinion could flip on that. But as of right now, yeah, I do believe Chris Godwin is the wide receiver you want in Tampa Bay. And Mike Evans is potentially starting to fade out. But keep track of it over the next few weeks. But go big game hunting with Mike Evans right now if you can get a Jamar Chase. I'm not going to talk about a wide receiver tie. We talk about a tight end. I feel bad that I chose a bunch of like big flashy names. I wish I could have gotten a little more in the weeds. But when I look at Sam LaPorta, I'm so uninspired. Like my worst fears with him are coming true. Because the big fear all along is that he wouldn't give you the positional advantage that you drafted him to be in the second round, which is why my exposure to him was so insanely low across all platforms, whether it was redraft. I don't have a single share of him in a redraft. In my best ball drafts, he was one of my least drafted tight ends. Now he's just a flat out disadvantage for your team. He's not even like keeping up with the top end tight ends. He's just a flat out disadvantage for where you drafted him. His 11.8% target share is bottom 5 of all tight ends in the league right now. He hasn't found the end zone. That was his biggest boost last season. Meanwhile, you look at Jameson Williams, he's leading the league in red zone targets right now. So if you can find a buyer that wants to invest in him at, as a top 3, even top 5 tight end still, like do it ASAP. Like if someone were willing to give you George Kittle plus a positional swap to come get Sam LaPorta, I'd have a really hard time turning that down because I am OUT. We talked about him on the panic meter yesterday. The more I've thought about it, the more I've slept on it, the more I'm very okay letting Sam LaPorta go. Because I really do think Cameron brought it up yesterday. Why use Sam LaPorta across the middle of the field when you can run Jameson Williams on drag routes the entire game with 4.3 speed, and he's going to pick up another 15 yards after the catch? Why use Sam LaPorta when you have that on your team to weaponize? So I'm done. I'm willing to be done after 2 weeks. I'd rather get out on these guys earlier rather than later, rather than hold on to false hope. That's typically how I like to do it with tight ends. Is if you don't give me something in the first 3-4 weeks, you're as good as dead to me. Like, get off my team. I can stream and pick up other value in other places.
Yeah, I think with LaPorta, you may be able to capitalize on, again, the name value of LaPorta right now. If the manager is like, oh, dude, like, look what he's done so far this year. Okay, fair, very fair.
Right.
Then at that point, yeah.
Why do you think I'm trying to sell him, right?
Yeah. At that point, you just got to wait for the good week and be like, when he has a good week, you'd be like, Sammy Ball game is back, baby. Back. Like, you need him right now. While fully knowing, like, this offense is not the same as it was last year. Again, the Jameson Williams emergence. We said this too on the panic meter, panic meter episode. We were expecting some regression from Sam LaPorta. We just did not expect it to be like
night and day, literally,
like a skyfall of a decline, or not decline,
free fall,
free fall, yes. Like it has not it has been a surprise to everybody.
We'll leave it at that. If you can find a buyer on Sam LaPorta, I would do it. Which elite tight ends would you try and get for Sam LaPorta? Would you Mark Andrews? Would you swap Mark Andrews?
Yes, I would.
Travis Kelce? I think I might hold on Sam LaPorta. Travis Kelce hasn't given me anything to be hopeful for.
Yeah, because that's the other because so with Andrew, maybe the best way to say it is this: with LaPorta and Kelce, I don't know what advantage Kelce is going to give me over LaPorta versus I know
Correct.
that Andrews has a little more of an advantage.
Obviously, Trey McBride. Nobody's going to give you Trey McBride for Sam LaPorta, though.
You should try, though.
You should try if the Trey McBride manager is dumb enough to give you him for Sam LaPorta. I mean, Trey McBride's numbers are so much better, man. It is.
Yeah.
Like Trey McBride's gonna, he could be the legit tight end one this year, and I'm gonna love that call. George Kittle. I just brought up George Kittle. I wouldn't do a 1-for-1 swap, but like you could get a deal done where Sam LaPorta and George Kittle are at the forefront, and you could add in the extra pieces to make that trade happen. I would do that. Dalton Kincaid. Would you do that? I think you could get Dalton Kincaid plus for Sam LaPorta.
You absolutely could. The thing that does worry me though is that like with Kincaid, it's just how he's been utilized so far this year. So like both of these guys aren't leaving you feeling any more secure or any more comfortable with them as your starting tight end. But in some weird way, like you kind of expect the course to kind of recorrect for Buffalo, if that makes sense. That like that Dalton Kincaid isn't going to have a negative ADOT, a negative air yards or something like that. Like you think that it can recorrect in Buffalo. So I think you could do Kincaid plus, and I would probably take that if maybe Sorry, I'm rambling.
The plus would have to be convincing enough.
Right. The plus has to be convincing.
Yeah. I don't want to just downgrade from Sam LaPorta to downgrade from Sam LaPorta. If someone were to give me Kincaid plus an enticing enough plus, I'd be interested then. But I'm not just going to move off Kincaid or move off of LaPorta just to move off of LaPorta. Like you still got to find the right package. But I think there's people out there who would still give you the right package for Sam LaPorta and give you an out, because they believe it's only 2 weeks and Jameson Williams can't be this breakout stud, forever. We'll wrap it up there, Ty. We'll call it good there. 4 buys, 4 sells this week. 2 running back buys, 2 running back sells, 2 pass catching buys, 2 pass catching sells. We'll be back tomorrow. 24 different players who will make or break week 3 of fantasy football. I'm at Lucas Wencl on Twitter. Tyler_Plath for Tyler. Excuse me. You can follow us, the main page as well. FFL is on Twitter. The FFL is on Instagram. Fantasy Football Fellas on Facebook and TikTok. We will see you all tomorrow. Make sure you're subscribed. 93%. I'm looking right at you. We'll see you all soon. Deuces.